Welcome, friends, back to Dominant Mets Nation. Today, we have a very important update and response to the news about Edwin Diaz. And you know what, folks? It is pretty interesting, but you know what? It's important for us to go over the latest development in the Edwin Diaz saga. Also, we are going to go over the Mets potentially signing the best pitcher on the free agent market. What does that look like? And what is the whole scenario with that? Because that is ultra interesting as well. All right, folks, before we get started, as always, again, I want to continue to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. Hit the like button, subscribe. We want to welcome all our Mets fans, MLB fans. Join the channel, join the family. We want everyone here. Okay, so the first very important news, especially after the very huge trade. A lot of eyes right now are focused on Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso. What is going on with those two? And apparently, with the Edwin Diaz situation, there is a sticking point in negotiations. So there is a little bit of trouble. So let's look at that. So the Mets right now, obviously, they're going under major changes. Nimmo gone. We have a lot of work to do. Nimmo had that 5-year contract, right? So the Mets got Simeon. He's only under a 3-year contract. So again, we know already from David Stearns, doesn't like these long-term contracts, really doesn't. So on Sunday, The Athletic, Will Salmon reported that the two sides, the Diaz camp and the Mets side, were reasonably far apart on the number of years Diaz should get. So New York obviously wants Edwin back, just not on the same year's timeline. So New York, doing their due diligence, has looked into possible contingencies, and they have that in place for the event that Edwin Diaz walks away from the table. Edwin already responded in last week's comments that he wants to do what's best for his family, and that there is a 50-50 chance that 50% going back to the Mets or 50% he goes somewhere else. So Edwin is willing to do whatever he needs to do to get the most money. So right now, contract length is a sticking point in the talk between Diaz and the Mets. Salmon wrote, Diaz, who's entering his age 32 season, wants the same type of deal he signed with the Mets all the way back in November of 2022 when he was 29 years old. The Athletic, Ken Rosenthal, previously reported 5 years, $102 million. That would be around the range that would get a deal done. Meanwhile, the Mets are inclined to prefer something shorter, perhaps 3 years. Now, it's very important to note that Edwin Diaz has 2 years, about $38 million left on the contract, and I believe an option for a third year. So I could see why, you're shooting for a couple more years if you're the Diaz camp, but it just really depends. Like, there are a lot of teams right now in the market for a top echelon closer. Yes, there's options elsewhere. Devin Williams, Suarez, a couple other options here and there, but nobody on the echelon or of the level of an Edwin Diaz. But again, he's 32 years old. It's something that if the Mets decide to pivot elsewhere, because, let's say Diaz wants 100 plus million and the Mets are offering between 60 and 80, there has to be a line somewhere. I'll just say it. There has to be a line somewhere. And I can understand where people would be upset because Diaz is the best of the best. But at the end of the day, like I said, the Mets are going through a process of change, and the Mets haven't won anything with Diaz, just like they haven't won anything with Nimmo, McNeil, Alonso. So if they do change up the core, maybe Diaz isn't like the guy you'd want to change, but I'm open to seeing what the backup plan is. Right now, Devin Williams and Robert Suarez have really both been contacting, at least the agents have been contacted with regard to the Mets situation. Okay, so again, going to that. So the expectation for New York, if the Diaz thing does fall out, they will aggressively pursue both Devin Williams and Robert Suarez. I'm assuming, probably not both of them, but they will contact both of them for the closer position. Both pitchers are widely considered to be the next best options in the closer market behind Diaz. The Mets have contacted the camps for Suarez and Williams multiple times recently. Williams and Suarez are both two-time All-Stars, but this past season, Diaz was vastly superior to both, pitching to a sterling 1.63 and striking out 98 batters, yet spending significantly more long-term on one closer compared to alternatives on the market could wind up leaving the Mets financially hamstring. Okay, so here's my take. Here's my take on the closer situation, the this and that. Mets right now are shooting for one thing and one thing alone. That is a World Series title. We know that the Mets bullpen has had so much uncertainty over the last 2 years. We'll just say under Stearns, especially this past year. Much uncertainty. What we do know is that Edwin Diaz has been the only certainty, the only thing that you could rely on in that bullpen. And over the course of him being here 6 years, he has been very dynamic. He has been very electric. And again, it is rightfully so for him to be called the best reliever in baseball. Now, Devin Williams, Suarez, they're both good pitchers. But in terms of being reliable in New York, yeah, that's another thing. Devin Williams came to New York. He had a lot of issues, a lot of, blunders in New York. He did pitch better in the second half of the season. But again, do I want to take a chance on even a talented closer that hasn't proven to be effective in New York? Because that is another situation. I don't think if I'm a 2026 contender for a World Series that I'm going to let an extra year or an extra $20 million for that matter stop me, especially when you're a New York Met organization. And quite frankly, you're not going to be making money unless you win the World Series. The Mets, revenue wise, were unprofitable, at least the reports I saw. So Steve Cohen already said, hey, that's fine. I'm going to take the money out of my pocket. That being said, I don't think it's going to stop the New York Mets from getting and securing a guy like Edwin Diaz. I really, really don't. Unless the Edwin Diaz camp gets ridiculous. You already know going into this, when you have 10 teams or a third of the league vying for the services of Edwin Diaz, it's going to be expensive. Now, if you don't want to get to a ridiculous 5-year contract because you are afraid of the length, then do something like 3 years, $25 million. Do a player option for the fourth year for $25 million, but that player option only kicks in if he 60 innings. If you have levels that he still has to show that he's performing at a high level for that fourth year to kick in, but they have to be easy levels, but still levels that show that he's pitching at a high level. That way, that's a 4-year contract, could go down to 3 years. But if the pitcher's doing his job, it's 4 years. And at the very least, it's a guaranteed $75 million, almost double what he's guaranteed right now. So everybody wins. You get a shorter contract, he gets to double his money, and he gets the potential chance to get that $100 million contract that he wants. That could be a compromise. That could be a negotiation. What we're going to have to see is how David Stearns and the Mets get creative and their willingness to really secure the best talent out there. Because yes, Devin Williams, Suarez, other options are there. But in my opinion, they are not Diaz. And they are not proven to be effective in New York. I just saw Ryan Helsley, an all-star closer, a guy that you could sell me could have been like a Diaz replacement before he showed that New York wasn't something that he could perform in. I would have, you could have sold me last year. Oh, he comes to New York in 2025. That's a great replacement or a possible replacement for Diaz. But again, you got to see right in front of your face, witness just a few short months ago how a talented all-star pitcher who could throw 102 miles per hour with a wipeout slider could potentially fail and not succeed. So again, that just shows me and boosts Edwin Diaz's value. Okay. And then also too, you pull on the guy's heartstrings. The guy right now has close to what 150, 200 saves with the New York Mets. The guy could sit in the New York Mets record books. Same thing you want to do with Pete Alonso, you could do the same thing with Mr. Edwin Diaz. What do you think, folks? Would you go the extra mile to keep Edwin Diaz here? Would you let nothing stop you? Or is there a point? Is there a point where you like anything over 4 years or anything over this amount? That you let that stop you and then you pivot to the next option? Let me know. Let me know. Let me know. I mean, with me, I just think it's so super important to have that closer. And I always think back to, hey, what were the Yankees dynasty teams be without a guy like Mariano Rivera? I think even a team of those great years back in the 90s would be so much so not where they are right now if they didn't have that lockdown closer that we currently do have. Okay, so let's go to the next option, the next pitcher, and I think that this guy is the most intriguing pitcher on the market. And I don't want to mispronounce his name, but Tatsuya Imai. I'm just going to call it Imai. So we all know that he is a Japanese sensation, pitching in Japan for about 9 seasons. Last year, he was 10-5, 1.92 ERA. Phenomenal, phenomenal. We're going to go over a scouting report, what this guy does, how special is he. And again, you hear guys like Dylan Cease. You hear guys who are, have talent, but they've been a little shaky, and they're going to cost you $200 million or 150. They're going to cost you a lot of money. Frambo Valdez. This guy is a guy who's younger. He's got just as much potential, in my opinion. But again, where does he want to sign? Where does he want to go? You got all those questions. Some questions were actually just recently answered, and that is why I wanted to update some of you who did not know. Okay. So again, he's very intriguing. It's just that, he does have the ability, like other Japanese players in the past, to sign wherever he wants to. So a lot of people were wondering, is he going to be another player that signs with the Dodgers? Does he want to play for the Dodgers? And apparently the big news is the Japanese ace revealed he does not. He does not want to play for the Dodgers. He doesn't. So, I mean, that actually came about the other day, and Imai told former Boston Red Sox star Daisuke Matsuzaka on the show, Hodo Station, that he would rather not join the Dodgers super team alongside with the other Japanese superstars. This is his quote. He goes, "Of course, I'd enjoy playing alongside Ohtani, Yamamoto, Sasaki. But winning against a team like that and becoming a World Series champion would be the most valuable thing in my life. If anything, I'd rather take them down." Folks, that has to be music to your ears. I mean, it's just been, going without saying, gonna go to the Dodgers. But at this point right now, the Dodgers won without you. The Dodgers, exactly. How much do you feel going to the Dodgers at this point when they are 1-1? What? They won 2 times without you? You mean nothing going there. You might as well go to another competitive team. And I think right now the Mets, you have to circle the Mets. You have to circle the Mets because they are willing to move heaven and earth to make sure their team is, World Series competitive. I mean, what's the next level team? Let's just say the Yankees. Well, the Yankees and their owner, Hal Steinbrenner, are basically, I don't want to say crying poor, but they're crying poor. The most recent thing I heard is they asked Steinbrenner, "Are you profitable?" And he doesn't even want to answer that, insinuating that he may be losing money. He has to pay the city $100 million in taxes. They only make $700 million in revenue. Now your payroll's $315. Take off $100, then you got to pay everybody else. Whatever. they are basically indicating that they are not going to be big spenders. Their payroll is 280 already. After the Trent Grisham, after that move, them getting suckered into that situation, and that's another situation. So they're out of the equation. Now we have teams like the Cubs. You always have the Red Sox in the equation. You have the Phillies, other big market teams that Japanese players I've seen go to in the past. But I gotta say, a New York team like the New York Mets that have shown a willingness to do anything and spend money hand over fist without even when they're losing money. I gotta say, it's a very intriguing situation. You have superstars in that locker room, former Hall of Famers, Soto, Lindor. I mean, this is going to be something that the Mets can, build their rotation around. And I think that it just gives the Mets such a leg up. And then we're talking about, I said they have to get two top echelon guys. I would sign this guy, still try to get two other guys, and the Mets pitching rotation would just be lights heads and shoulders above where they were last year. So it's very, very, very exciting. Very exciting. Okay. So Imai, he didn't play in the 2023 World Baseball Classic with Otani, Yamamoto, and Sasaki. However, the 28-year-old just put together a dominant season last year. Again, 1.92 ERA. He pitched in 164 innings. So a lot of times, guys, you want to see how stretched out are their arms. And in that 164 innings, he notched 178 strikeouts, 5 complete games, 3 shutouts. So he does have the ability to go long in a game. That's also nice to see. And I'm just looking at some quotes that he says. Moving from Japan to the United States, it's not an easy transition. Having other players from Japan could have some benefit. Okay, so I think this is one of his other quotes. If there was another Japanese player on the same team, I could just ask them. I could ask them about anything. Imai told Matsuzaka, but that's actually not what I'm looking for. In a way, I want to experience that sense of survival. When I come face to face with cultural differences, I want to see how I can overcome them on my own. That's part of what I'm excited about. I mean, folks, again, another fresh air. This guy is not following the crowd. And one of the good things I like about what he's saying is the guy sounds like a leader. I'm not going to follow the crowd. I don't care about if things seem more difficult. It's a challenge. This is the type of attitude. This is the type of person. This is the type of personality I want in my clubhouse. I want on my team, right? Now, we know that the guy has had very talented stats, very, very talented stats if you go throughout his career. But what does he have in terms of a repertoire and what can he bring to the table? So let's kind of look at that. Let's really kind of look at that. He's a really interesting starter from a data perspective. And let's dig down into a couple things. So the fastball velocity is a really good thing. He averages about 95.5 miles per hour. So you can tick it up. Averages 96 miles per hour, and he has the ability to touch 98, 99. So that's a good thing to have in your back pocket. 99 miles per hour. Fastball, not bad. So you see the major league average for seamer right now is 94.5 miles per hour. So he's a little bit over that. Okay, so the big thing is you want to know, why is this guy so effective? What does he do differently? What are his attributes? So his release height apparently is much lower than the major league average, and it's much lower by 10 inches. That creates a visual perception for a hitter of his fastball being very flat to the zone. So it's hard to get under it and get on top of it. He's a little bit undersized, but gets down the mound really well, but it's really a low slot. The average arm angle in baseball is right around 40 degrees. He's around 20 degrees. That's a big difference. So right off the bat, visually, he presents just a whole different thing than major league hitters are even used to. So, okay, number two. So, Imai also throws a slider that goes completely against expectations. Sliders from right handed pitchers typically bite away from the hitter. So, they go away. Pete Alonso, remember the slider that goes to the opposite batter's box? Okay, so that's very important to note. So, toward Imai's moves the opposite way. So his slider dives right into righties. So, I mean, usually that would be like a backup slider, but that's very, very interesting and abnormal. Very interesting. So, not only visually, it's very, not what you would expect, but the way the ball moves is also extremely bizarre and different. Very weird. Okay, so the last thing that is really weird is the slider apparently has a very odd shape. One you don't see a lot in Major League Baseball. That makes him a very difficult to project going forward in Major League Baseball. There's not a lot of precedence of this arm side slider shape. So not a lot of guys do this. I mean, and that's also another thing. Like if you do something not many people do, you are very a unique anomaly. I would assume just by itself, your uniqueness and players not seeing this is going to make you that much tougher. And then at the end of the day, he's got velocity. He throws hard. He also gets three variations of off speed that are really effective. So, how is this change of pace? Very good. He's got a fascinating arm. You're going to have to pay him probably, and this is what the projections are. Apparently, they have him projected making close to 150 million or so, along with the posting fee. So that's the thing. Like despite his great credentials, they're not in Major League Baseball. There is that uncertainty. And if he's going to cost you that much money, and this is just a projection that I had listed here from one of the websites, that's a little high. That's a little steep. So, first question, would you be willing if it's 125 to 150 million? I'd be interested in a guy like this, but I, usually would think a guy like this you could get at a more of a value price because of the unknown. But if it gets to that thing, and we saw what Yamamoto. Yamamoto was off the chart. Yamamoto was 24, he's 28, so he's still at a pretty young age. Okay. So the potential here is obviously tantalizing, but there's also a high degree of risk. Is it too much for a team like the Mets? Is it too much? I mean, let's see if the Mets can kind of work something out. I don't see the Mets as a team afraid to take risk. He's a guy who has, I would say age on his side. A lot of the pitchers, like Fran Valdez, 32 years old. Max Fried last year was 31. This guy, you have already 3 or 4 years of really prime baseball left in him. So even if you sign a 5-6 year, probably almost 75% of that contract will be, age 28, 29, 31, and 32. So, that's something really to consider. Okay. So again, here's the deal. If we get in the range of the 150, the risk scale tends to go up, right? And then it also depends on how many years you want to give them. But if we're talking about anything around a 5-year deal or less, 5-year deal or less, you take them to age 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. So I mean, you really go to the end of age 32 season. So even after that, it's not crazy. So 5 years, $25 million a year. That's $125 million. So that's going to be my offer if you want to give him an option for a 6 year. That's what I'm going to sit with. And I think that's a very, very generous offer. I didn't envision anything close to 150, but then again, I'm like thinking back to what Yamamoto got, if they consider him of that level. But I always thought Yamamoto got a ridiculous, ridiculous number because, his scouting report was actually even more ridiculous, even more nasty. And he was 24 years old. All right. And he was 24 years old. So age, the youth, the potential. And not that this guy doesn't have potential, but he's got weird high potential. Like his pitches are a bit different, his arm angles are a bit different. Like his skill level is not of the skill level of a Yamamoto. The age is not of a Yamamoto. So again, I'd want to definitely stay. Like $125 million to me is a huge risk on a guy like this. But if I'm the New York Mets, I think if my scouting department felt very strongly, I think pitching being cost the way it is. I mean, you're paying Sean Manaea $25 million, so you're paying Sean Manaea $25 million. This guy seems like he's much more talented than Sean Manaea. So, all right. So that being said, let me know what you think. What are your opinions? How do you feel about MI? How do you feel about the closer of, well, not potential closer? How do you feel about the Edwin Diaz situation? Would you go the extra mile, or is there a point where you say, you know what, that's it? And also to MI too, is there a point where you say, hey, you know what, that's it. This is too risky. Move on. And then I want you to think about one thing before you answer that. Think about the alternatives before you say let's move on, because that's how these things get to, I guess, very high prices. Last year, behind Soto, what was the next best bat? Bregman. That's why I think the Soto thing just went to the other stratosphere. Also, too, you get a Hall of Famer on the free agent market at age 26. That just doesn't happen. But again, think of the alternatives for Diaz. Think of the alternatives for MI. I mean, so you can have Dylan Cease, you can have Framber Valdez. Okay, that costs you money. Then you can go after Tariq Skubal. Okay, that costs you money and a whole slew of prospects. So, that puts things into perspective a bit more, at least with me, when I think of, okay, if I don't go here, what's plan B? So we'll see. We'll see. All right, folks. Again, like, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Always want to hear what your opinions are. Drop your comment. Let's go Mets. Happy Thanksgiving. Again, go check out my video. I did earlier today. Actually, not early. I did like 2-3 hours ago. I did it about David Stearns, how he's going to have a monster offseason. So I'd like you to check that out as well. So thank you again. Have a